Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDens of Pop Culture. We're back in film noir territory in this video. We're looking at D.O.A, classic picture. Now, released in 1950, copyright is 1949, so you will see it listed alternatively as one of those years. I guess we'll really call it a 1950 film since that's when it was released. It's had many remakes over the years. Color Me Dead in 1969. D.O.A. in 1988, which I seem to remember was pretty popular. Dead on Arrival 2017 and D.O.A. 2022. So just 5 years apart there. It's a good flick. It's an interesting flick. We'll start rolling through it. Then I'll throw the spoiler sign up at a certain point. Because you almost get a spoiler at the very beginning of the film, but well, if you're going to watch the movie within about 2 minutes, you'll already have that spoiler in front of you. So I'm not going to worry about that. At any rate, let's jump in to this movie. Take down the poster. Bring up the slideshow. All right. Harry C. Popkin presents, and just right off the bat, let's say Popkin is a really fun name. And so we see this building, it pans down, and we see a man walking across the street, and he is suddenly flattened by the movie's title, D.O.A, a United Artists release. Well, it turns out the man's okay. So he goes across the street to this building, up the stairs, and we see him walking down this corridor, and we get our first credits starring Edmond O'Brien and Pamela Britton. Now, Edmond O'Brien did a lot of films. Did a lot of really good films. Barefoot Contessa, The Killers, White Heat, The Hitchhiker, which I've reviewed on this channel. The Girl Can't Help It, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Also a really weird TV movie with Alan Alda that I watched recently. And he was really creepy in it. And I can't even think of the name of that at the moment, so we're not going to worry about it. Pamela Britton did a lot of work on Broadway. She played Blondie on TV, the TV version of Blondie. And was also in my favorite, Martian. And to continue on, we have Luther Adler, Lynn Baggett, William Ching, who was in Pat and Mike, Henry Hart, Beverly Garland, Call Right Out. Now, in this film, she is Beverly Campbell. Didn't have the Garland name going yet. Queen of B movies. She was in the Decoy TV series, which I have reviewed on this channel, and was later on My Three Sons and Scarecrow and Mrs. King, which I happen to be watching. Neville Brand, interesting guy, and he does a really excellent job in this film, playing a psycho, but also got a Silver Star and a Purple Heart in World War II. And he played Al Capone on The Untouchables. So, interesting guy. Laurette Luez, Virginia Lee. All right, music written and directed by Dmitri Tiomkin. And notice this whole credit sequence, pretty smart because it's not just credits with sort of a neutral background. It's kind of advancing the story. And with the music, thank you, Dmitri, is sort of ramping up a little bit of tension right from the beginning of the film. Executive producer again, Harry M. Popkin. And you see a cop at this point pointing him down the hall to where this guy is heading. Story and screenplay, Russell Rouse and Clarence Green. They collaborated on quite a few things, and one of them was also involved in, I think, in maybe one of the remakes. But they also collaborated on Pillow Talk, very different movie. Take note here of Ernest Laszlo. He's our director of photography, does a great job. But also our director did some excellent cinematography himself, notably on Gilda, which I've reviewed on this channel. So, man, I'm starting to, you know what? It's because I'm really building up a lot of reviews on the channel. Producer Leo Popkin, lots of Popkins in these parts. Directed by, as I said, Rudolph Maté. He was a collaborator with Fritz Lang and many others. And as I mentioned, did cinematography on Gilda, which is a real triumph of cinematography. And so the man finally arrives at his destination. And now we're really going to begin the film. He is at the homicide division. He's shown to the man in charge, And note, we have not seen our protagonist's face yet. And he announces that he wants to report a murder. Bum, bum, bum. You know what? I will throw the spoilers up now, just in case some folks haven't seen this yet. So are you ready? Well, where was this murder committed? San Francisco last night. Who was murdered? I was. Wow. So that's our hook for the film. Now, it's a good hook. This is what this is what you call it in films, a framing device. So we have this beginning where we're sort of beginning at the end of the film in a way. What we're going to see through most of the film is done in flashback. He's going to tell the story of how this came to be. So it's good. A little tension early on. Now, here's the question. Does it reduce the impact of what happens later on in the film? Maybe a little bit. But when you find out how this was done and what it's all about, it creates its own layer of tension for the movie. Okay. So this doesn't surprise the chief that much. He starts shuffling through papers, asks the man if his name is Frank Bigelow. Yes. Alert the San Francisco PD. We found Frank Bigelow. So he was already aware that something was happening. And so here's where we're going to begin the story of how this happened. This is where we kind of come out of our frame. We go into the flashback as this man explains, well, how he's been murdered, and yet he is reporting it himself. So Frank Bigelow lives in a small town near Palm Springs. He does accounting. He is a notary public. And you see him here in the background, Pamela Britton playing Paula, his secretary. And he's also got this sort of adoring client. I mean, you know how women tend to fall for accountants. Well, Frank is heading to San Francisco for a little vacation, a week. And Paula wants to go with him. She's kind of jealous. You know, she says, go to San Francisco, but don't expect me to be waiting for you when you get back. By the way, that is just an uncanny imitation of her voice. I'll just tell you right now. She's very deep grab. No. So he kind of, she slams the door. He kind of goes in after her and she pleads with him. Why can't you be honest with me? She finally calms down and he invites her to Eddie's for a drink. Now, Eddie turns out to be Sam Drucker, moonlighting. This is actually about 16 years before Green Acres. And I swear Frank Cady never actually looked young. So booze, cigarettes, a winning combination. Well, Paula makes another stab at going with him to San Francisco, but then realizes that maybe he needs a weekend away from their relationship. He's feeling trapped. He's feeling hemmed in. He levels with her. He's had a bad experience in the past with marriage, and he doesn't want her to get hurt. Cares about her. Well, she says, okay, go off, figure things out, and come back when you're convinced. And the scene ends with a kiss. Okay, so that's who this guy is. That's what he's doing. He's getting real close to marriage. He's getting a little bit nervous. He's going to go to San Francisco for a week. She's a little nervous about this too. He's going to maybe find somebody else, decide he doesn't want to get married. But she decides, I got to let you do it, because if you don't, it'll never work out. So we get to San Francisco, one of the great film noir cities. And Frank arrives at the St. Francis Hotel. He's immediately checking out other women. So he's a real peach. It's the end, apparently, of what is called Market Week. So conventions, lots of salesmen in town, that kind of thing. It's a party atmosphere. Lots of swell-looking dames around. And so help me, every time he sees one of them, they make a slide whistle noise. Now, you don't get a lot of slide whistle in film noir. And I'm really not sure you should. But the interesting thing to me, though, maybe it's designed a little bit to get you off guard. Now, you've had an amazing, intro, I've been murdered. But then you get into something that feels like you get in a screwball comedy, maybe, or Three Stooges short. I'm still personally, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? I honestly probably could have gone without it. But he puts a call in to Paula. She left a message for him at the desk. And they chat, and he's kind of distracted. He's got his door open. You kind of saw the woman. If you go back, you kind of see the woman across the hall. Okay. So Paula's trying to make him a little jealous, but she also lets him know that a Mr. Eugene Phillips phoned the office 3 times today, and he'll be getting in touch with Frank in San Francisco tonight. And she leaves him with a devastating line. There's nothing you could do that you ever have to feel guilty about. The lady's good, because that line basically means you're going to have to feel guilty about everything you do now, because I've let you off the hook preemptively. Smart woman. And so he ends up chatting with the bellboy for a minute, and it took me a minute. I'm going, I know this dude, not in the credits. It's Jerry Paris, famous as the next door neighbor, the dentist on Dick Van Dyke Show, Jerry Helper, and also for directing the majority of Happy Days episodes. This has to be like one of the first things he ever did. It's a very small part, but I swear it was driving me absolutely mad trying to figure out who he was, because I just knew it. So the bellboy leaves. The guy from across the hall asks to use Frank's phone to call room service. His phone is all tied up. Well, he ends up inviting Frank over to the party that he's having. And he introduces Frank around, innocent enough. And then Frank ends up in this Roomba with a woman that he's been sort of checking out, And it turns out to be the host's wife. Host is Sam. Wife is Sue. Well, the happy crew decides to go paint the town, and they're taking Bigelow with them. Okay, and he's kind of like, it's a married woman, maybe, not so sure. He goes along anyways. He's here to have a good time. So they head to a jazz club. Kind of hilarious in this scene, because the crowd is way off rhythm with what the band is doing. Now, you could easily make a joke here about, white people trying to keep a beat. But bear in mind, often that's because when they film these scenes, there's actually no music there. The guys in the band are just doing this. They're pretending to play. They add the music later on. So the crowd sometimes actually has no music to sort of try to keep the beat with. I learned this from watching the commentary on an episode of Psych. At any rate, Bigelow's sitting with Sue, sort of hanging on him. And we see some flashes of jealousy from her husband, Sam. He kind of looks pissed, and Bigelow knows it. And Bigelow's not into this. Like, once he knew she was married, he wasn't like, hey, well, maybe I'll give it a... No. He's not that kind of guy. The music's hitting this fever pitch, and Bigelow is not enjoying himself. He's not encouraging Sue at all, and he's kind of getting knocked around by a guy who's dancing next to him. So he finally excuses himself. He leaves the table. Kind of looks like me when I'm in a lot of meetings at work. Well, anyways. So he goes over to the bar. And at this point, we see this sort of mysterious figure enter. Got the coat, got the scarf, got the hat. Okay, so Bigelow ends up sitting right near this guy at the bar. And he also notices a blonde at the bar across from him. And the plot thickens here a little bit. Bartender lets him know that she's here all the time because she's jive crazy. But is she fluent in jive? Well, okay, we're not going to worry about that. This woman always comes in alone, drives a big convertible, wears a mink coat. So Frank decides he's going to give it a little bit of a shot here. He heads over, offers to buy her a drink, and tells the bartender that he left his drink at the other end of the bar. Okay. And here's a real pivotal moment in the whole plot. The mystery person puts down one drink and picks up Frank's drink. So he's effectively has replaced the drinks. The guy leaves when the bartender picks up the drink. Bartender kind of gives him a suspicious look. And then he hands the drink over to Frank. Frank, clinks glasses with Jeannie, played by Virginia Lee, and takes a drink. And it doesn't taste right to him. It's not bourbon. So he orders a fresh drink. Now we're in Noir territory. Average guy takes a little walk on the wild side, and everything begins spinning out of control. Frank notices that his former party, or one member of it, is looking for him, so he asks Jeannie if they can get scarce. She says he can meet her later, gives him a phone number to the next club that she's going to be hitting. So our hero leaves the Fisherman Club, the jazz place he was at, heads back to his hotel. Soon as he's in the room, he's about to call that number, and then he notices the bouquet of flowers that's been sent to his room with a note from Paula. And he kind of smiles at that and then tears up Jeannie's number. So he's not a complete jerk after all. Okay, he gave it a shot. Turns out he cares too much about Paula. All right. So I think that a lot of what we've seen so far is intended to give you a sort of measure of this man. Okay, he does a couple jerky things, but maybe he's not a bad guy after all. You need to care about this guy. And look, this is not like a super charismatic, leading man type, right? Edmond O'Brien wasn't that type. So we need to get to like this guy. It's not like a Cary Grant or even a Jimmy Stewart where you probably kind of like the guy the first time you see him. They got to work up to it. And that's going to be important to this film and what he's going to be up against. So the scene ends with him tearing up that paper. And then we fast forward a little bit. We see him waking up from sleep, kind of holds his head. He probably figures it's like a hangover. In the background, you can kind of make out some noise. Maybe folks are still partying, that kind of thing. So sure enough, room service soon arrives with a hangover cure for him. But as Frank is about to take the drink, he seems to kind of get sick at the sight of it. Just asks the waiter to take it away. So he goes out to get some fresh air, still seems to be sick, kind of jumps a passing trolley. He winds up at Sacramento and Jones at a medical building, number 1298. And here it is today. I managed to find it on Google Earth, so you kind of see, it's changed a little bit, but that's basically it. Building in the background is a little different as well. All right. So the doctor there gives him an examination. Everything looks fine. Just want to see the results of some tests they gave him. Frank begins to get dressed. The nurse comes in with a weird look on her face, like she knows something that she doesn't want to say. Then the doctors come back in, 2 of them now, and give him the bad news. He has been poisoned. It's what's called a luminous poison. Apparently it's a real thing. They even tell you that at one point, I think at the end of the film. His body has absorbed enough of the toxin to prove fatal. There's nothing they can do. There's no antidote. Oh, and will you be paying in cash? No. So he's got a day, a week, 2 weeks at the outside to live. Now we kind of understand how he's been murdered, but he's still alive to report it to the police. Okay. He's ingested the poison. It's going to kill him. He's got some time left. He's not sure how much. Here's one thing, though. The movie from this point on has to do with Frank trying to track down who did this to him, right? I think if they'd been a little more specific about how long he has left, I don't know, maybe that adds more tension to it. Could have 2 weeks to live. I mean, that's not a lot in real life, but in a movie, 2 weeks to live is going to probably carry you well through the end of this thing. Okay. You get the idea. Maybe they could have trimmed that down a little bit. So he doesn't believe them. Can't come to terms with it. So he visits another hospital's emergency room and asks for an examination for the luminous poison. And he gets the same results. You won't feel too bad at first, the doctor tells him, but then it will happen suddenly. And he says again, 2 days, a week at the most. So we've narrowed it down to he's got about a week to live. All right. The doctor learns that Bigelow doesn't know when it happened. So it must have been intentional. You have to know how to handle this kind of poison. It comes out that Frank was drinking last night. That must be how it was done. So the doctor wants to admit him to the hospital. And he has to call the police to report this as a homicide. Homicide? I don't think you fully understand, Bigelow. You've been murdered. It's a great delivery of the line. And it's a great hook for a mystery. And it gives us this ticking clock to help ramp up the tension. So Bigelow reacts just about the only way he could. He flees the hospital, and we see him running down crowded city sidewalks and streets. Lots of unintentional documentary here of 1940s, 1950, San Francisco. If you have the time to watch it slow and you're like a native of San Francisco, you might see some really cool stuff in it. I will say they go a little long with this. I probably didn't need to see him running quite as much as they had him running. He finally stops at a newsstand to catch his breath. Notice the placement of Life magazine right next to him. Okay. And while he's here, he sees a child playing. He sees a couple meeting. His life is over. Other lives are continuing. And as he walks away, we see a look of grim determination come to his face. So he's kind of gone through denial and panic, and now he's at acceptance. And this determination takes him back to the fisherman, where he figures the poisoning happened, but they're closed, not open till 6 p.m. So he goes back to his hotel room, and he goes to the room across from him, wants to know where the men who were there last night have gone. Poor lady who's there now has no idea. The cleaning lady tells him they checked out early this morning. So, okay, you figure, all right, this guy was jealous about his wife. Could he be the one? But if you really think about it, no, he clearly wasn't the mystery man who replaced the drinks. This guy probably didn't have a handy vial of luminous poison on him, but he's desperate for leads to something. So he goes back to his room, gets a call from Paula that he's really not in the mood for. But in between getting her angry, he finds out that Mr. Phillips, who was looking for him yesterday, has died. Well, this sets him off, and he finds out that this guy's Phillips' office is in Los Angeles. Okay, maybe this is a clue. Guy's looking for me. He doesn't find me here in San Francisco because he's died. Guy's desperate. All right, he flies down to L.A., and goes to the aforementioned office, whose secretary is played by Beverly Garland. And when he tells her his name is Bigelow, she gets a worried look on her face and sends him in to see Mr. Halliday, who is now essentially his boss. Well, Halliday, played by William Ching, doesn't know why Mr. Phillips wanted to talk to him. And he's afraid that means that he made his trip for nothing. And this sets Bigelow off. How did you know I made a trip? But it turns out he got the info about where Bigelow's office was located from the secretary. Or did he? So he does learn that Mrs. Phillips lives at the Sunset Arm Apartments and that Mr. Phillips died by suicide leaping from the balcony of his apartment. Okay. So he heads over there, and once there, he's greeted by Stanley Phillips, played by Henry Hart, the dead man's brother. Halliday phoned to let him know that Bigelow was coming. And then he meets Mrs. Phillips, played by Lynn Baggett, and she's afraid she doesn't know why her husband wanted to speak to him. So this is feeling like maybe a bit of a dead end. He leaves, but in the hall he talks to the brother, Stanley, learns that Eugene Phillips was in a bad jam. He was arrested 2 days ago. He sold some iridium to a dealer named Majak. The iridium turned out to be stolen. So he was released on bail, but he faced a pretty stiff prison sentence. And this was very unlike Eugene to be involved in something like that. He's like an importer-exporter guy. Wasn't that what Kramer was pretending to be? Importer-export? I can't remember now. Stanley wants to know how Bigelow figures into this, since he admits he he'd never met Eugene. And frankly, Bigelow doesn't know. He doesn't know how he figures into this. Maybe he doesn't figure into this. Again, desperate, looking for clues. So he checks into the Allison Hotel, and there's a message there to call his office right away. Goes up to his room, calls, talks to Paula once again. She wants explanations of what's going on, and he just can't do it at this point. Remember, the clock is ticking on his life. So she lights up a bit when he tells her he misses her. And guess what? She found Philip's name in one of his notary ledgers. He's like, what? He notarized a bill of sale to a George Reynolds from Eugene Phillips of Los Angeles. The bill of sale was for a shipment of iridium. So Reynolds had told him he'd made a deal in Palm Springs and stopped in his office on his way to have it notarized. This was about 6 months ago, so he does figure in to something. And this was supposedly stolen iridium, and a guy was arrested. Okay, in a little bit deeper, but still doesn't really know what's going on. So Bigelow rents a car, drives back to the Phillips apartment, and Mrs. Phillips is not really thrilled to see him. He asks her about George Reynolds, and Reynolds disappeared about 2 months ago. Her husband was suspicious something was wrong. When he was arrested, he couldn't find the bill of sale. It was mysteriously missing. But if he could have, it would have been Reynolds who faced the prison term. Okay. And as he leaves, he says, the only thing that puzzles me, Mrs. Phillips, is why you didn't ask me why I knew there was a bill of sale. Is Mrs. Phillips involved in all of this? All right. We're in a kind of a murder mystery here. A little bit of a whodunit. We're setting up potential suspects and, frankly, knocking a few suspects down. Who wanted to kill this guy? Is it all this Phillips stuff, or is it somebody else? All right. So we got to lay the pipe a little bit. So he goes back to Phillips' office with questions for Miss Foster. Who did Phillips try to call before he tried to call me? They love mirror shots in film noirs. I think partially because mysteries like this are a lot of people talking in rooms, and you need ways to make it visually interesting while they're doing the stuff they have to do. You get that also in really well-drawn comic books. You got to use different angles, interesting angles on people if they're just talking. Sometimes you can heighten the drama that way. Sometimes you can even improve the storytelling that way, but mostly it's because panel after panel of people who look exactly the same with word bubbles gets boring. Same kind of thing for movies. So Foster plays coy, won't reveal anything, but Bigelow does not have time to play around. So he gives it to her straight. Phillips was murdered. Who are you trying to protect? He finally strong arms it out of her. He went to see Marla Rakubian, a model, a mistress of his, but Phillips hadn't seen her for some time. He'd been looking for her for the last 2 months. Okay, that's when George Reynolds disappeared. That's when Phillips got suspicious something was wrong. When he returned from her, he was very upset, and that's when he called Bigelow. And another parting shot, nice, tells Miss Foster that she must be pretty friendly with Stanley, because he knew how desperate Eugene was to contact Bigelow, even though he wasn't present at the time. So it's maybe starting to come together. We're peeling off the suspects. We're adding new ones. Okay, he's following the trail. Good. That's what you want in a murder mystery like this. All right, Marla Rakubian, played by Laurette Luez, is not thrilled to see Bigelow either. He's just not a popular guy, but mostly because he just barges right into her apartment. Well, she's sailing down to Buenos Aires, and he wants to know where George Reynolds can be found. She doesn't know, except she has a photo of his in her suitcase, so maybe she does know. Well, the strong arm technique doesn't work well here. She gets the drop on him with a gun. And he turns the tables on her, though. He manages to get a hold of the pistol, keeps it, and takes the photo. This is probably going to be important later. When he leaves, though, she has a little smirk on her face, like maybe he hasn't bested her after all. Bigelow rushes out to the photography studio that's on the photo to try to get the address of the man in the photo. Well, he doesn't get the address, but he does find out that the man in the picture is not named George Reynolds. He's named Raymond Rakubian. Okay, Rakubian. So we're getting a little deeper. Leaves the studio. A gunshot rings out, and the bullet hits the ground near his feet. He ducks behind a car, and he manages, pulls his pistol, and he kind of manages to work his way over to where he thinks the shot came from. It's like a warehouse, sort of a factory. So, and what I like too is when he was making his way over there, he's a little bit clumsy. This is a guy who might have fought in World War II, right? But this is not an action hero. They're trying to, you could almost see, frankly, like a Jimmy Stewart being in a movie like this. He could have played this because he has that everyman sort of feel, which is what they're going for. They want the crowd to be like going, my God, imagine if this happened to you. You're in a bar, you take a drink, you've been poisoned, and it turns out it was intentional, and who would want to kill me? Right? That's a great setup for a movie. So, starts making his way through this warehouse, wanders through, and he's almost hit by a falling barrel, which means the murderer could be Donkey Kong. But no. Evidence doesn't support a giant gorilla. So he finds the window where the gunshots are coming from, and on the ground, there's a matchbook for the fisherman. Okay, so this links the two events for sure. He runs downstairs, almost catches up with his assailant. The guy gets away in a car. Okay, back to Philip's office. He asks Halliday if he's ever seen the man in the photo, Ray Rakubian. Nope, never seen him, never heard the name Rakubian. Bigelow asks some pointed questions, which Halliday answers angrily, then throws him out of the office. All right, not Bigelow's day. So Bigelow goes back to his hotel. And before he leaves his rent-a-car, he stashes the pistol in the glove compartment, which I'm not sure is the best move he could make. He's inexperienced, perhaps, but it also feels a little bit like a false move in the script. Why wouldn't you keep this on you when you've been shot at? Okay. Maybe he's worried about the police. I don't know. Well, sure enough, he walks into his hotel room, and Chester, played by Neville Brand, gets the drop on him. And of course, he doesn't have his gun. And so Chester gets a hold of the photo, and he roughs him up a little bit. Neville Brand was friggin' great in this role. He is a scary dude. So Paula then calls, and while the guys hold a gun on him, he tells her, draw all the firm's money out of the bank, $2,200. Buy that coat you always wanted. She thinks he's drunk, and he closes with, Paula, I'm sorry I left you. I didn't realize how much I loved you, but I know it now. Which kind of, gets her a little bit misty, as it would. But it's nice. And I think also, again, shows the character of the man and what he's, this is a decent guy who's going through something kind of hellish. I think the audience needs to have that connection to the guy in order to make this work. So this little investigation of his, kind of back and forth, as he's running down these clues. Okay. So Chester and the other muscle take Bigelow to see Mr. Majak, involved in that iridium deal. And we learn here that Chester isn't just a violent guy. He always refers to himself in the third person. He seems like he's probably not quite right. And they're definitely setting him up for the guy you most want to see have, something terrible happen to him in the film. So Majak kind of explains what happened, since in a way it doesn't matter. He had Rakubian unload stolen goods on Phillips. And Bigelow's like, I don't really care. I just want to find this Ray Rakubian, because he thinks that's the guy that poisoned him. In the process, he ends up taking a swing at Chester, and Chester goes full psycho here. Majak manages to stop him. He's not afraid, Chester. You can tell a man is afraid by his eyes. Look at his eyes. So he's like, cut it out. But Chester definitely Woke up choosing violence today, and probably does every day. So Majak sends the boys away so they can talk. And we get a big reveal here. Raymond Rakubian was Majak's nephew. And he could not have tried to kill Bigelow because he has been dead for 5 months. An urn engraved with his name is his alibi. Well, of course, that could tactically be faked, but probably not. So now Majak has a problem. This has all been a sidetrack for Bigelow. And Majak had no reason to kill him, but now Bigelow knows too much. So Bigelow asks, if I can convince you that all I want is the guy who poisoned me, will you let me go? And the answer is no. He tells Chester to take Bigelow and kill him. So Chester heads off with Bigelow in his rental car, and he's going to dump the body somewhere. Talk about your awkward road trips. And more unintentional documentary here as they're driving, in LA. And man, Brand again, it's just fantastic as the psycho. I'm going to give it to you in the belly, Bigelow. You don't like it in the belly. And he has that crazy smile. It's really good. I really enjoyed him in this. Well, Bigelow manages to slowly work his foot over, and then he slams his foot down on Chester's on the brake, stopping the car. He jumps out of the car and he runs. And he makes it into this drugstore with Chester right after him. And of course, people freak when they see Chester's gun. I bet they don't like it in the belly either. And Chester, being a psycho, just opens fire like a maniac in this drugstore. And the sequence here is absolutely amazing. Chester's firing. The pharmacist sneaks around the counter and throws a bottle and hits him in the head. And this causes Chester to accidentally fire at a cop who has just walked in to see what's going on. And he fires back. And that's the end of Chester. And Bigelow kind of just hightails it out of there. Like, I didn't see nothing. I'm out. It's a short sequence, but it's really done. And this, of course, gets Bigelow out of the situation. But he seemingly, this far into the movie, is back to square one. Can't be this Rakubian guy. It's not Majak. Who the hell is responsible for all this? Well, he goes back to the Allison Hotel. Where else can he go? And waiting outside is Paula. So he pulls up in a cab, heads straight for his rental car, but then she calls his name. She runs to him. He looks around, okay, because obviously he doesn't know if somebody's still after him, and he doesn't want her to get hurt. And they head over to the side to talk. She wants to know what's going on. She notices that he looks ill right after he hung up. She got a call from the San Francisco Police Department wanting to know where he was. She didn't tell them, but she definitely knows something's up and wants to know what's going on because she loves him. Well, he doesn't tell her about the poisoning. And she feels really helpless here, feels like she's losing him. Why won't he confide in her? But there's nothing she can do to help him. He wants her to go home to keep her safe. And it's actually a really nice moment and a nice goodbye between these two. They bring the violins out for the scene as well. All right, so now we're in the end game. Bigelow heads over to Miss Foster's apartment. Is Stanley here? He lets her know that he suspects Stanley is behind everything and wants her to call him. But then he hears a voice from behind. It's Stanley clutching his gut. It was the widow Phillips. Stanley found a love letter written to her from Halliday. All right, so that's where he needs to go now, for sure. He's been bouncing between these people, but he's slowly finding out what's going on. And I will say that obviously Stanley was poisoned. He tells him it's luminous poison, tells Miss Foster, call the hospital right now. He might still be, you might be able to save him. So looks out for a guy when he doesn't necessarily have to, because he certainly has his own problems. Well, once again, Mrs. Phillips is not happy to see Bigelow when he arrives. He says, you knew who I was when I came here today, but you were surprised to see me alive, weren't you? But I'm not alive, Mrs. Phillips. Sure, I can stand here and talk to you. I can breathe and I can move, but I'm not alive because I did drink that poison and nothing can save me. And they move out to the balcony. What are you going to do? If I kill you now, I've got nothing to lose. She begs. She blames Halliday. And why did Halliday want to kill Bigelow? Because he could prove there was a bill of sale. And then he sees from the balcony Majak and his remaining boys arriving in a car. So she makes a run for it, and Bigelow catches her, finds out that Halliday is at the office. So Halliday is involved in all of this stuff. Halliday is definitely the bad guy. Bigelow locks her in the closet so she can't warn him this time that he's coming, and he heads out just ahead of Majak. Bigelow arrives outside Halliday's office. We see him stumbling a bit, so the poison is doing its work, and we know we're getting really towards the end for this guy. But he's in stealth mode. Majak has arrived, though, too, so he's hiding from him. All right. So Bigelow is almost caught. He wriggles away, takes off running, and Majak and his other henchmen get in their car to pursue. Bigelow manages to hop on a city bus as it pulls away, with Majak close behind. And in their car, they pull up next to the bus, a bus with the word Gaylord hanging in the sky behind them. I'm not sure what the Gaylord was. Maybe any 1940s LA experts could tell us in the comments. Great shot here, though. Bigelow with Majak in the car behind. They set that up really nicely. But Bigelow spots him. What can he do? Well, when the bus stops, Majak's boy gets on, while Bigelow gets down, crawls on the ground, sneaks out through the rear door of the bus. And the cop forces Majak to move on, while Bigelow stands there next to him watching. So finally, it all comes down to this. Philip's office and Halliday. Bigelow is growing weak. He doesn't have much time left. He arrives in time to see a figure emerge from the door with very familiar clothing on, leaves the office. Halliday turns to see Bigelow waiting down the hall. They approach each other slowly, and then Halliday runs down the stairs. He turns to fire at Bigelow, misses, and Bigelow has a gun, lets him have it. Halliday gets his, and Majak probably will as well, from the police. And so we go back to our frame. And Bigelow, finishing his story, says, "All I did was notarize a bill of sale." That was it. And his last word is Paula, and he collapses. And the chief, somebody asked the captain, how shall I make out the report on him, Captain? Better make it dead on arrival. And so the movie ends. What a ride. D.O.A. has a great gimmick to it, for sure. But it's only a gimmick without executing the rest of the plot and building believable, strong characters that you actually care about. It's a really great film, good film noir, and even has, frankly, a Hitchcockian aspect to it. The innocent man on the run, because even though we do see Bigelow kind of take a walk on the wild side, that's really not what caused him to be poisoned. That's sort of a red herring. It was really him just doing his job and notarizing a bill of sale. I like that you have all the sort of dead ends, that you get these different suspects, and they're not all just lined up right at the beginning. They emerge, and then, well, that's not likely. Well, maybe it is likely. Oh, I didn't know this. So it does go, there's a lot of back and forth, but there's back and forth for a good reason. And at one point, I even wondered, could Paula actually be behind it? Because he's catting around in San Francisco? Could she have hired somebody because she was jealous? She was angry. I didn't really think that, but I wondered about it at one point. And then you get the people in the hotel, etc. So I think it's a really great flick. It's very enjoyable with good performances, and it's an excellent use of the man on the run motif. So I strongly suggest give D.O.A. a try. Now, I've never watched any of the remakes. And I do want to see the 80s one, though, because I know that it was pretty popular when it came out. At least I seem to remember it was very popular. But go ahead, give D.O.A. a try. And if you have seen it, or if you do watch it, let me know in the comments what you think of it. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this little review, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will hopefully see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.